Another food-like item that's in that realm when it comes to thyroid health that is controversial is salt because of the iodine. So let's talk about how iodine interacts with the thyroid and how we can make sure we're doing that in a healthy way.
Well, one of the things that's fascinating to me is at the turn of the previous century, we in the United States had an epidemic of hypothyroidism and goiter. It's actually estimated that over 10 million people, particularly in the Midwest, died from hypothyroidism. And that was one of the reasons that the federal government and actually 20 other countries in the world mandate putting iodine in salt. That's where Morton's salt came from, the little girl with the umbrella. And recently, in the last 20 years or so, everybody's using sea salt or pink salt or Himalayan salt. And unfortunately, neither of these have any iodine in them. So we see a number of health seekers, if you will, who are using these non-iodized salt, and they don't make adequate thyroid hormone. Shockingly, when we send them out and have them start using iodized sea salt, and there are a number of varieties out there now. Even Morton's makes iodized sea salt. Their thyroid function goes back to normal. So iodine is one of those easy to fix ingredients that used to be mandated. And we now know why it was mandated and why it's so important to get into our diet.
Why do you think there is so much controversy around that? Because even myself, somebody who's been in this health world for so long, I'm hearing all different sides to that iodine story, and I'm actually hesitant to take, things that are fortified with iodine or take that as a supplement. So I just want to really get in here and get into the nuances of where all that came from and why there is that fear.
If someone actually saw patients 6 days a week for the last 20 years and measured these levels every 3 months and manipulated their iodine, they, I think, would be entitled to make statements about iodine. But if you're not measuring this in patients every day, then you don't have a right to fearmonger about iodine being good or bad for you. And like I said, this science is so old. 100 years ago, iodine was mandated to save people's lives. And we don't have to rehash this. This is an easy one.
So bottom line, even people with Hashimoto's, across the board, iodine is part of a healthy routine.
Yeah, Hashimoto's has nothing to do with iodine. Hashimoto's has to do with leaky gut. And when you fix leaky gut, Hashimoto's resolves 94% of the time in my patient population. Fix the leaky gut, say goodbye to Hashimoto's, or for that matter, any other autoimmune disease.
Say somebody wants to be a bit more controlled with their iodine intake and opt out a sea salt that's been fortified with it. What kind of dosage would you recommend to the average person if they want to get tablets? Or is there a different method that's better to supplement? Because I know you can get some that absorbs through the skin, and there might even be other forms. What's the best way to take it and how much?
Well, we actually have people, if they want to, use spirulina as their source of iodine. There's a wonderful product from Life Extension called C-iodine, SEA. It's basically made from kelp. 1,000 micrograms is all we need to change somebody's thyroid numbers. But the easiest way is just get yourself some iodized sea salt. You can't overdo it.
All right, let's move away from the iodine piece of the salt, but stick on salt and talk about other reasons people may be fearing salt and avoiding salt. And the other big one that jumps out to me is high blood pressure. So somebody right now that is dealing with a blood pressure issue and they're avoiding salt, is there any merit to that?
There I mean, there have been a number of studies looking at a low sodium diet and high blood pressure and congestive heart failure. And there are a few people in my practice that do seem to be salt sensitive. There's the DASH diet is a low sodium diet that's popular with the American Heart Association. I unfortunately think that most of the recommendations from the American Heart Association on diet are 180 degrees wrong, and I say that as a former president of the Southern California chapter of the American Heart Association, but we can get into that whenever. So one of the things we see and others have seen is, particularly if people are embarking on a low carbohydrate diet, a ketogenic diet, however we want to define that, a high fat diet, we see that salt actually plays an important part in mitigating the effect of high uric acid levels. And I personally instruct my patients, if they're going to embark on that, to actually actively add salt to their diet. And there's lots of easy ways to do that, whether you just want to take your salt shaker of iodized salt and shake it in your hand and lick it up. That works really well. Whether you want to put a little salt in your coffee to kill the bitterness, that works really well. Or whether you want to use some of these new salt packages. I personally like Element. My wife is addicted to it. I make one at Gundry MD. There's lots of them on the market. But salt in general, sodium chloride, should, I think, be balanced with potassium and with magnesium. And in fact, whenever I have people who might be salt sensitive, it's not the sodium chloride that's the troublemaker for them. It's usually the lack of potassium and magnesium. And so we take those folks and we give them salt, but we also give them potassium and magnesium. And that seems to be the missing piece of why sodium might be potentially bad for you.
And for the healthy person out there that might be consuming an electrolyte like Element, which I'm a big fan of as well, they're a sponsor of the show, and then they're adding sea salt to their food to taste, do we have to worry about pushing that too far if we're a healthy person and we're just doing it within what we'd consider moderation? Or is it more of a concern the other way, people avoiding it because they fear it?
Well, one of the things we have to realize is that most of the deaths during marathon running come from hyponatremia, low sodium and low chloride, because all they're doing is consuming water and not replacing the lost electrolytes. The other thing I see in big-time water drinkers is they run low sodiums and chlorides in their blood work, in their fasting blood work. And those guys, when we start literally, supplementing them with sodium chloride and potassium, magnesium, aspartate, those issues resolve. And a lot of these are women who, are carrying around their jugs of water everywhere they go, and yet they're feeling tired, and they're being told by well-meaning trainers, well, you're tired because you're not getting enough water. And they're tired because they're hyponatremic. And once we replace these electrolytes, miracles, and tell them to stop drinking so much water, their tiredness goes away.
So I guess a more proper way to word that would be get your 8 glasses of water, whatever that is for you in that range, with electrolytes, so it's more balanced.
Yeah, I think, another way you just mentioned, one way to think about getting salt in your diet or controlling salt in your diet is, either cook with it, then don't add it at the table, or my preference is don't cook with it, but then add it at the table. And that works out pretty well.
One of the common arguments for adding sea salt for a lot of the people in the health and wellness space is the minerals when you get a sea salt that's been unadulterated. Do you think there's any merit there? Like the amount of minerals you're going to get from a sea salt, is that actually something we should factor in?
Well, I think trace minerals are definitely deficient in our current diet. And I've posted a lot of YouTube videos about this that we use to get a lot of trace minerals out of our soil. And it turns out that you actually have to have a soil microbiome to allow absorption of minerals out of the soil. And you have to have soil that contains these trace minerals. And as early as 1936, almost 100 years ago, there's a Senate document that I love to tease people with that basically says our soil is now so depleted that you could eat continuously and never actually get the nutrients that you need to function from our soil. And this was a document from 1936. And that was before we killed off all of the soil microbiome with herbicides and pesticides and Roundup. And now our plants, our soil, are completely devoid of these trace minerals. And sadly, a head of lettuce may look like a head of lettuce from over 100 years ago, but it doesn't contain those same trace minerals. An apple may look like an apple, although now it's the size of a grapefruit, but it doesn't contain any of those minerals anymore. So most people really need to supplement with trace minerals. Now, one place to get it is a high-quality sea salt, but adding trace minerals in a supplement is also a good idea.
If you enjoyed that clip, press here for the full episode. I'll see you over there.
So what we're learning, sadly, is, you can have microscopic, nanomolecules of these things, but because they never detach